Greetings viewer, my name is Tony and welcome to the Megaman Tutorial Series. This is video number 6 where together we're going to be making a Megaman style game together. We have now reached the point where we're going to be making enemies. And in this video we're going to be creating Pepe the Penguin and Killer Bomb, also known as Killer Bullet. So the scene consists of 5 penguins and 3 bullets. So let's take a look at what you're going to have by the end of this video. So we're just going to let it play through real quick. So they're going to come from the left side of the screen, and then they're going to come into camera view here. And as you can see, we still have our damage. Okay, so let's go into invincibility real quick before we die. Actually, let's die. Let's see. And so we see that before we had the freeze enemy, you can see that they froze on the screen when the player died, and the scene reloads, just like we had in the last video. So now we're going to go into invincibility just so we can see what happens without dying. So they're all going to come across the scene, and what you're going to notice here, let me zoom down a little bit. Once they exit the left side of the camera, they actually disappear, and what's happening is they're coming to the right side of the camera. So once they exit camera view, they re-enter just on the right side of the camera view, so they come back into the scene. So if we actually move Mega Man with the camera, you can see that they disappear on the left and reappear to the right. And if we keep going left, you see they don't disappear at all until they exit the camera view, and then they reappear to the right. So this is how you can move enemies, and we're going to get to that towards the end of the video. So let us do the explosions. And so we have that, and if we just kill the penguin. And he has a small explosion. Where the bomb, there, big explosion. And we'll stop right there. So let's get started. Okay, so we have our project 5 open from video 5. If you're just now joining us, you can go and download it from GitHub, which the link is in the description. Otherwise, if you've been with me from the first video, then you know it's been a long journey to get up to this point. And if you've been waiting for the enemies, well, they're finally here. So, as I said in the beginning, we're going to be starting with Pepe and Killer Bomb. So, let us go and take a look at a couple of videos real quick. These are actually from the actual Mega Man first game from Nintendo. Let's play this. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and replicate his behavior. So as you can see, he basically follows a curved path, and he has a small explosion. And so that's basically all he does. He just follows a curved flying path, a Bezier curve, and he has a small explosion that doesn't hurt Mega Man if he happens to be in the path of it. So let's close that. And this is actually a double feature video because we're actually going to be doing Killer Bomb as well, because they're basically almost identical except for a couple things. So let's open up that video. And so he basically follows a curved path as well, but he has a large explosion. And if you happen to be in the path of that explosion, I happen to be in invincible mode with the cheat code, but it would damage Mega Man if he's in the path of that explosion. So we're going to be building these 2 enemies today, and what we're going to also do is go and take a look at, we don't need this anymore, we're going to go take a look at this website. You can go to this website to see all the enemies off of Fandom, and basically these are the properties that we're going to apply to each of these enemies. And in the previous videos we added score points, health points, damage. So this is Pepe, so he's worth 500 points. He has 1 health, and his attack, which basically if he touches Mega Man, then he basically takes 4 health off of Mega Man. If you come up here, then there's Killer Bomb. he's worth 800. He has 1 health point, and if he touches Mega Man, he takes off 3 points, and if you get in his explosion, then he takes off 3 as well. So those are his properties. And these are properties that we set up in the enemy controller class. So all we have to do is just plug those into our enemy when we create them, and then they'll be all set. So we don't need this anymore. Actually, we do. I'm going to keep that open. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to go and edit the enemy controller. We're going to add a new function, and it's to actually flip the sprite. So we're going to come down here and go after start. And so we're going to create a public void called flip. This is basically exactly like we did with the player controller class. However, we're not going to have that boolean for is facing. So we're going to use the transform and rotate. We're going to rotate on the Y. And we're going to save that. So we're just going to add this in because our enemies are going to need this, so we can tell them to flip if they're going to be mostly you play the game, they're always coming basically from like left to right, and that's how we're going to do it. But we're going to have the option if you ever want to go from right to left, but then we're going to have the option if they ever want to go left to right. So this is what we're going to do. That's what we need this function for. So then also we go back over here, let's get this out of the way. We're going to create another script, and it's basically going to be a utility function script. So go into your scripts folder, right click, create a new C# script, call it utility functions. This is where we're going to store functions that we can use globally throughout all of our other scripts. So think of it like a globals file. So let's open that up, and I'm not going to type this out. I'm just going to copy and paste it, but I'll give you a chance so that you can type it out. And this is the function that we're going to use to do the Bezier curve. And you can read all about it on Wikipedia. And this function actually comes from this video. So at your leisure, you can check this video out. So all it is basically a translation of the Bezier curve into C#. So I'm going to copy this, and we don't need any of this, and we're going to drop that in there and save that. So what this does is basically you have a curve, and you can, if you watch the video and read about it, then you'll know what these points are basically for. But there's a start point, an end point, and a middle point, and float t, which is, I guess you can consider as like time, or basically a percentage throughout the curve, kind of like lerp. And this curve is formed based off where the control point is. Now what we're going to be doing is our control point is always going to be in the middle between the start and the end. So it's always going to be halfway. So this curve is always going to be, I guess, like a camel hump. So you're going to see how we're going to use this function when we create the first enemy, which is Pepe. So with that done, let's go back over to Unity. First thing we're going to do in Unity is, actually we don't need this open anymore, so we're going to close that. We're going to create some folders. First folders that we're going to create are, we're going to go into animations, and we're going to create a folder called enemies. Inside of enemies, we're going to create 2 new folders. First folder is going to be for our penguin, and the next folder is going to be for killer bomb. And then down in the prefabs folder, we're going to create a folder called enemies there as well, so we keep everything organized and neat. So once those are created, then we're going to go into graphics, and we need our sprites. So inside the graphics folder, you're going to go to the Megaman enemies image and open up the sprite editor. So we already have Pepe, but we only have the first frame of Pepe. But we're going to get the second frame, and then we're going to get each of these bombs. And you'll notice each of these bombs has a different color. There's blue, orange, and red. So let's start with Pepe. So we're going to draw our rectangle around him, and we're going to call that Pepe 2. Apply that. Sure. So that's Pepe 2, and that's Pepe 1. So then we're going to get the bomb. First bomb. So we're going to call this Killer Bomb Blue. Apply that. Then we're going to get Killer Bomb Orange. Oops. And then we're going to get the red one. So Killer Bomb Red. And let's make sure all our names are good. Pepe 1, Pepe 2, Killer Bomb Blue, Killer Bomb Orange, Killer Bomb Red. Okay, so now we have our sprites. So let's close out of that. So what we're going to start with is first, we're going to get rid of these 4 extra penguins because we don't need them anymore. They were placeholders for the damage, collision, and explosions. So let's get rid of those, but we are going to edit this one penguin. First we're going to start with is, let's just change the position, and we're going to change the scale because all those sprites are kind of small, so we bump them up 1.5 times their size. So second thing, actually let's see, so you can see this as we're doing it. And let's bring that over. Oops. Where's that at? Pepe. There we go. So if that happens to you, what you do is just select the game object and press F on the keyboard, and it'll basically focus in on that object. So keep it on there. All right. Turn off the flip X. We don't need that anymore. That's what our rotate's going to do. Now we already have this set, so he's layer order is 10, so we don't have to mess with that. However, what we are going to change is his box collider. We're going to bring it in a little bit. We're going to bring it in basically inside of the 1 pixel area. So it's inside this outer black area. And this doesn't look right for some reason. But maybe it is. And then what we're going to do also is expand that and choose his box collider. And those are going to be the same values. So 22 and 13. So 0.22 and 0.13. So his box collider and his hitbox are going to basically be the same. Next, we're going to come down to the rigid body, and we want it on kinematic, which basically means that we're going to control his rigid body through code. So physics don't really apply. And we want it on continuous for collision detection and for it to never sleep. But what we are going to do is we're going to lock the Z, so we don't mess with the Z. The only constraints that we actually modify are him going horizontal and his vertical. And from that website, which I should have left up, but actually, let's see if I can find it again. Should have kept that up. We don't need that tab. So his points are 5, health is 1, attack is 4. So his points are 5, his health is 1, his contact or attack is 4, but he's not going to have explosion damage. Killer Bomb does, and we don't need the bullet because he doesn't actually shoot anything, so we can remove that. He doesn't have block, but yeah, maybe a time where you want him to actually be invincible. And remove this. But what we do need is a prefab for the explosion. His explosion is the first effect, which is a small one. So we're going to change that. Okay. And make sure his tag and layer are on enemy, which should be from one of the other videos. And let's get rid of that. That's annoying. But what I am going to do is I'm going to reorder these because I don't like the order that they're in. So we're going to, you don't have to do this. This is just my OCD. And so I'm going to drag these in that order. Okay. So we can expand all those. And that's set. So what we need to create is his animation. So we're going to go over to not effects, but enemies and Pepe. Inside the Pepe folder, we're going to right click, create a new animator controller, call it Pepe. And then we're going to create a new animation, and we're going to call it Pepe Flying. And then double click on the controller, go back over the project tab, highlight the animation, back to the animator tab, and then right click, create from selected clip. So go back over to project and go to your Pepe object there, and up in the animator, drag the Pepe animator controller over to the controller. So now we have the ability to edit this. First thing you're going to do is change the samples to 20. Go over to the graphics, and you're going to expand the enemies sprite sheet. And now we have Pepe and Pepe 1 and 2. So we're going to take those, highlight both of those and drop those in at the beginning. So we have Pepe 1 and Pepe 2. So now if we bring this over, we're going to play it so you can see what it looks like. So basically it says propeller. So that's his animation. So his propeller flies, it goes, it spins, and that's his animation. So that's all there is to his animation. So we can stop that. We'll bring this out of the way. So the base of Pepe is now set, so you can save all those changes. And now we need a new script. So as I said in one of the other videos, all the enemies are going to have this base enemy controller class, like a foundation class. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a specific script for Pepe, which is going to control his movement. So anything specific to the enemies, they're going to have the secondary C# script attached to them for like movement, or if they shoot bullets, things like that. So we're going to go back over to scripts. We're going to right click, create a new C# script, and we're going to call it Pepe controller. Well, let's open that up in Visual Studio. Go back over to here and go to your Pepe object and scroll down to the bottom, and you're going to drag the script onto there and save. So now we're going to code. So first thing we need to do is we need to define some variables. So we need an animator for our animation, rigid body to control the movement, and we're going to get a instance of our enemy controller class because we're going to use that. Then we need to determine if we're facing right or not. So we're going to add a bool. And then we're going to have some variables that have specifically to do with our Bezier curve. So the first one is a flag, whether we're following the path or not. You'll see what this is used for when we get down to that. Then we need a vector 3. That's our start point. Then we need another vector 3 for the end point. And then we need a vector 3 for our middle point, which is actually calculated. And when we started this time, that's where that variable t comes into play. So, because it's basically a calculation, you'll see how that's used. Then we need 3 floats that are going to be public. The first one is how long the curve, or basically how long this curve is going to be for, and that's used in the calculation with the start time. So we'll see how that's used too. And then the distance of how far it'll travel, that's used to calculate the endpoint from the start point. And then a vector 3, which is the height, which is used in the middle point. So new vector 3. And these values I've already calculated to approximate as closely to how the game is. So you can actually change these and mess around with them and see what kind of results you produce. But when we're done, these are basically going to be the values that we use for our penguin and killer bomb. So with that, let's see, AF, yep. Then we need an enum called move directions. And this is basically where we can tell it, okay, well, we want to go left to right or right to left. And then we're going to create a serialized field of move directions called move direction. And we're going to initialize ours starting going left to right. So we want to go in the left direction. Or we're going to go left to right. Now in the start, we're going to use our enemy controller. We're going to get that component that's attached to our object. And then the animator is going to be from the enemy controller. Animation, animator. And then our rigid body. All right, let's make sure that looks right. Enemy controller, get component, animator, enemy controller, animator, rigid body, 2D, enemy controller, get component, rigid body, 2D. Okay. Now, when our object starts up, we need to determine which way that we want them to face. So by default, we know that our sprite sheets, if we go and take a look at that, I can't really tell there, so let's just open it up real quick. All of them are facing right, but in our game, we want everything is basically going to coming from right going left, so they should be facing left. So, oh shoot, I didn't want to start that. I just stopped it. So let's go back over to here. And so by default, we know that they start at facing right, so we have to set this, but what we're going to do is based off our move direction, which is now a serialized field which we can set through the inspector, We're also going to be able to set it through code as well, but for this point here, it's through the inspector. So move direction, if it's equal to left, then we want to flip the sprite. So we're going to say is facing right is actually false because we're going to be facing, we want to go left, and then we're going to use the enemy controller flip. So this is our initialization code for Pepe. So we want to make sure, because we default to left, we're going to say move direction left, facing left. But if we actually change it in the inspector, it'll override this and we say right, then this won't get executed and it'll stay right, and we don't have to flip it because we already know it's facing right. So we can skip all that. So now, in our update function, now you're going to finally get to see where that freeze enemy, remember we had this, where is that at? It's up here at the top. Remember we had this public bool called freeze enemy? Well, now we're finally going to use that, and we're going to use it in the enemy's main class. So if enemy controller.freeze enemy, and so what we're going to do is if it's frozen, we just exit, so the update doesn't update, it just kicks out. However, inside of here, we need to add a compensation. And what we're going to do is while we're frozen, we need to add on delta time to our start time. What will happen is if we do not do this, which I'll show you later, is if we don't do this, our path time was started at one point and it was used as part of the calculation of which Bezier point in the curve that we want for range for time of t. So if it's 50%, it'll be 0.05 here, and it's expecting this, as the time is used to calculate that. However, if we're frozen and we're not moving, then what's going to happen is as soon as we unfreeze, it's going to be all screwed up, and our penguin will basically drop because his time has already passed. So what we have to do is increment the time, add on to that while we're frozen. So it doesn't really matter if Mega Man dies because the scene reloads, but if there's a point where you have some sort of cinematic thing happen where you freeze the game and then something happens and then unfreeze it, and this penguin or the killer bomb or anybody else that uses a time-dependent variable, and they were frozen, and basically it's all messed up and everything. So what we have to do is add on delta time to this to move it along, even though the character isn't moving on the screen, but the time is, so that it stays in check. So we need to add this. And I'll show you what I'm talking about later. Next, we're going to play the animation. And our animation is called Pepe Flying. So his propeller will spin. Now we're going to check that flag. It is following path. And when we're not following the path, or we are following the path, then we will actually do the path. So within here, this is where when we're not following, we need to calculate where we're going to be in the curve. So, or actually we have to calculate the start, the end, the midpoint, and get the time. So those are the things that we need to do before we start, flying. So what we're going to do is create a float called distance. And then we're going to check is we're facing right. If we are facing right, then our distance will be positive because we're going left to right. So when we go from left to right, positive horizontal x. Otherwise, it should be a negative x, so a negative distance. And we need a question mark there. Next, our path start point is actually going to be our current location. So our current rigid body's transform position. So that's where we are on the screen currently. Now our endpoint is going to be calculated by our start point plus our distance, so it can be positive or negative, and on our start point's y, which doesn't change yet, and the z, even though we don't use it, but we're going to keep it in here, we have to use it. We could just set 0, but we're not going to do that. And what is wrong with this? Oh, x. Then our midpoint is going to be our start point plus our end point minus our start point, which we get basically the distance, the full distance, but half, which will be the middle. So the halfway between the start and end points. And then we're going to add on that height, which that vector 3 that we created at the top. Now the reason I did you notice it has zeros for the x and the z, and we only choose the y. Well, I did that. You could just make it a float if you wanted, but I did that just so that you can add on the it's a vector 3, playing with other vector 3s, so you can just do a simple addition to it instead of creating a new vector 3 here with 0, 0, which is basically what we did up here. So you can ignore the x and the y, or the x and the z, because you only care about the y. And then we're going to curly brace that, and end that off. So then we need to know when this path is starting, and we're going to use time.time. So this is when, so what is wrong with this? Oh, not start point. Yeah, there we go. And then this is our flag to say, okay, now we're going to start following the path. Now you know this is happening update, so it's happening every frame. So when we come in here, we're going to do this once to get our start and end. Now we're going to actually work through the start and the end. So what we need is a float called percentage, and that's going to be the time, the current time, minus when we started this. So it should tell you how long it's been since it started. And then you're going to divide that by how long we're expecting this to go for. And in this case, we told it we want this to be 1 second. So this basically calculates a percentage. It's going to be from 0 to 1. If it basically goes past this point and over, it'll be greater than 1, but 0 to 1. So this is very much like lerp. You're lerping through the Bezier curve. Then we're going to change the position. And this is where we use our utility function, the Bezier. So we know that the parameters for that are our start point, our middle point, our end point, and our percentage. So this is basically going to say, okay, well, where in this curve, what point do we want out of this curve? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that down so that you can see it. So now we're going to check if the percentage is greater than or equal to 1. When we reach 1, we've actually hit the end of the curve. So it should be the last point. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to multiply the height by -1. And the reason we do this is, so every time we get the end, we're going to multiply by -1. we calculate the next, we go to the end, we're going to calculate it by -1. So this is what this is going to do, is it's going to create this wave effect, because if you don't do this, say your curve, we'll just go left to right in this case. Your curve here, start, end, and here's your curve. So what it'll do is it'll go like this, and then it'll go like this, and it'll go like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up and down, and then we're going to invert the height, so it's going to go down to up. So it's going to create this wave effect. So that's why we're going to multiply the height by -1. So it's going to be 0.08, and then the next pass it'll become -0.8, and then next pass times -1, negative times negative is positive, 0.8, etc. So it's going to do this over and over and over. And now that we've hit the end of our curve, we're going to say, okay, we need to calculate the next start and end point, start, mid, and end points. Okay, now that's our update function. Outside our update function, we're going to create a public here. Our public is where we can dynamically change the direction if we want while the game is running. So why you would do that? Well, that depends on your game. So, but we're going to add it in here just so that you can do it. So we're going to say the move direction, which is at the top, is going to be changed to the direction. Now you're going to see where the facing right and facing left comes into play. So if our move direction is equal to left, start there, we're going to see if we're, okay, we want to go left, but if we're facing right, we want to flip that by inverting it. And then we're going to flip the sprite. So that's for that case. So if we say we were going right, and now we want to go left, if we're facing right, it'll flip it. So else on this would be, okay, well, the move direction must be right then, because we only have two cases for that. So if we're going right, let's see. So if we're not, if we're facing left, then we want to do the same thing. Is facing right is equal to not is facing, so invert it. And we're going to flip that as well. So if we're going right, we want to go left. If we're going right, we're going to flip it left. We're going to flip it so we face left, and vice versa. If we're facing left, we want to go face it right. So this is very much, this is basically the same in two places, but this is going to determine left to right, right to left. So let's save that. Last is another public function, and this one we call is, we're going to say reset following path. And all this is going to do is give access to our internal variable, and we set it to false. And what we can do while we do this is, well, you'll see it later. I'm going to show how this all works out in the end. But if we're following a path and we pause it on the screen, what's going to happen is when you unpause, or actually not pause, but it's not the pause. It's actually if once the character is outside of the camera view and you move it, while you're moving, you're changing the point at which it's, so you're changing the point at which where it's going. So it's going to basically go, oh, well, that's not the point I was supposed to be at. And the Y is going to end eventually decay. And over as if this character keeps going from left, exiting and moving to the other side of the camera over and over, the Y is slowly going to decay. And he's going to go lower and lower and lower. So we have this here so that we tell it false, so that the next time this runs, it'll calculate two new start and end points. So we're basically kind of resetting the points, the points that we're going to be following. So That's why we have this here. And we're going to use that when we get to the to checking whether we're inside the camera view or not. So this is basically Pepe. Now we're going to save that. We're going to come over to here. Let's go to our Pepe and let's just check it out real quick. Let's zoom this down. I am going to, let's just double check. So his time is 1, distance is 1.0 left. He's going to go left. He's going to go, his direction is going to go, he's going to be going left. So what I'm going to do with this guy is, we're just going to move him. Let's move him all the way over. You can't really see it. Let's just start there. So let's play this and watch over here. And there he goes. He's flying. So he's following the curve. So he's at the top, he's going to go down, then he's going to invert and go back up. So he's following the curve. So that is what we wanted to do with him. So he's following the Bezier path. And through each frame, it's calculating what the next point's going to be in the curve. And we're controlling his movement through code. So that is Pepe. So now what we're going to do, he's basically done. We're going to zero him back out and we're going to make a prefab out of him. So let's save that. And then go over into your prefab enemy folder and drag him in there. Boom. So now he's a prefab. So now we can instantiate copies of him whenever we want. Next, we're going to move on to Killer Bomb, who is basically identical, except for a couple of things. So first, create new empty. I'm going to call him Killer Bomb. And we can zero all that out. And then create a empty of that child. We're going to call that hitbox. And so that's going to be child of that. Now back on the Killer Bomb object, we're going to tag it with enemy, and the layer is going to be, where are you at? Enemy. No. So we only want the tag enemy and the layer enemy on the parent, which is Killer Bomb, but the hitbox is going to be no tag and the default layer so that collisions will work. Because we know that when we're on the enemy and the player layers, they're going to basically ignore each other. So what we need to do next is we're going to drag on the enemy script. Now, if you remember from one of the previous videos, at the very top we had these require components things. Now this is why I have that. Check this out. So when we drag this onto this Killer Bomb, it adds all those components on for us, so we don't have to go and search for them and put them in there. So that's pretty cool, right? So first thing, let's change the rigid body. So we know he's going to be kinematic as well, and he's always continuous. He doesn't sleep, and we lock his Z as well. On the sprite, we go to our graphics. Let's just put a one Killer Bomb in there so we can see what it looks like. Let's bring this over. Actually, you know what, Pepe, we don't need you because we'll drag more copies of you in there later. And where are you at? Change the order of the layer to 10. So there he is. But he's kind of small. So bump him up on 1.5 on the scale of the X and the Y. So now he's big. So that's for the sprite. And on the controller, let's go back over to that website. And we know that Killer Bomb is worth 800. He has 1 health. So he's actually worth 800 points. He has 1 health. And his contact damage is 3. His explosion damage is 3. So his contact damage is 3. His explosion damage is 3. And we need to put in the damage, the block, and the explode prefab. And he doesn't shoot bullets because he is a bullet, but he doesn't shoot anything. So let's get this out of the way. So damage clip, go into sounds, where you got sounds, audio, sounds, and we want the damage clip. So enemy damage is going to go there. The dink is the block sound, and the prefab, if you go into your prefabs and effects, he's got the big explosion. So we're going to drop that there. So that's to set up the enemy controller script. So we'll save those changes. And what we need to do next is we're going to bring this over one more time. Zoom in. We need to reset the box collider. So let's reset that because right now it doesn't, we dragged in the image after the fact. So if you reset that, it's going to see what the sprite size is and it's going to adjust itself accordingly. But we want to edit. We want to go inside of the 1 pixel again. So inside of there, inside of there, inside to his nose, and his belly. So there. Let's clean these up. So 3, 0. So this is going to be 0.14, 0.14. So that's his bounding box, you could say. And what we're going to do is we're going to right-click, copy the component, get out of the way, go to the hitbox. We need to add on a box collider for this. So we're going to add on a box collider, and we're going to, that's for the hitbox, paste the values. So that's the same. And then check is trigger. So that's a trigger. So now if you go to this, it's the same. Both of them are the same. So let's save that. And I'm going to double check and make sure everything's good before we move on. Okay, I think everything looks good. We're going to move this out of the way. So now we need an animation for him. Even though he doesn't actually animate, he's just static, but we're going to have animations for him. And the animations are going to basically control his colors. So we need a new animator. So go to Assets, Enemies, Killer Bomb folder, and you're going to create another animator controller, and you're going to call it Killer Bomb. And then you're going to create an animation, and that's going to be Killer Bomb Flying. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce something new in here. Right now we've been creating basically single controllers. What we need to be able to control between the colors that we choose, if he's a blue bomb or he's an orange bomb or a red bomb, what we need are animation controller overrides. And the override is kind of like this, I don't know, the simplest way I can point it is like it's like a pointer almost, or it's like you're mapping, use this controller. If it's blue, use this controller. There, basically, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's not great at explaining things. But before we do that, we're going to double click on the controller, go back, highlight the animation, like that, right click, and from the clip, so now we have that. And we're going to go here, and this is actually going to be an empty animation. So we're not going to actually have anything in this. This animation is going to be nothing. So what we're going to do now is you're going to right click, create, and what you need is an Animator Override Controller. So the first controller, these controllers are going to be based on the colors. So we need a blue controller. Then we need an orange controller. And we need a red controller. And then we need an animation for each of those colors. So we're going to create an animation, Killer Bomb Blue, actually Flying Blue. And then another animation, Killer Bomb flying orange, and a red one. Killer bomb flying red. Okay, so now in your overrides, let's go to the blue one. First, we need to, so the parent, I guess you could say the parent controller is the main one, which is Killer Bomb. So we're going to drag that in there, and then you're going to see what the original, this is the original animation that's tied to that controller. So what's the override? Well, this is our blue override controller, so we want the blue animation. And then you're basically going to do that for the other colors as well. So the orange override, the main controller is Killer Bomb, but the override animation is orange. And the red, the main controller is Killer Bomb, but the override animation is flying red. So these are going to override this main one. That's why this is going to be empty, because there's really nothing that's going to be in here, because these colors are going to override this anyway. So there's nothing to put in, just plain old Killer Bomb flying. So it's an empty animation. But what we do need for each of these animations is turn on loop time, because these, actually, I'm sorry, take that back. That's what I forgot. I think I did in Pepe. Did I do that? No. See, Pepe flying, he needs loop time, because his propeller flies. So let's save that. But Killer Bomb, he's static. He doesn't need that. So let's see. Now he's a single frame animation. So you can basically kind of just like put these all to one. These colored flying animations. And we're going to go to blue, go to the graphics, and then you're going to drag. Oh, well, this is where it's kind of like, ugh, why? So we need to put the controller on there, because otherwise it's not going to let you mess with it. So do the override blue, put it on the animator on the object. There, now we can do that. Then you're going to have to go to graphics, drag in the blue, save that. Then go back over to enemies Killer Bomb, drag in the orange override to the object animator controller. And then you go back over to graphics, drop in the orange picture or the orange sprite, save that, and then go back over to the enemy, go to the red override controller, back to Killer Bomb, go to red, graphics, and then the red animation. There. So save that. And now go back over to Killer Bomb and enemies, and then drag in the main controller and drop that in there. So save that. Okay. So the animations are all set. So blue, orange, red. All right. Next, shrink that. We need code. I believe that is what we're going to do next. And yep. So we're going to right click in an empty space, or I don't know, I have to right click on one of them. I'm going to create a new script. And this one's going to be called Killer Bomb Controller. And with Killer Bomb Controller, go back to Killer Bomb. Hello. There. Scroll to the bottom, drag that script onto Killer Bomb. And then you can double click on there to open it up. Back over to Unity, save that, and back over to Visual Studio. Now the thing about Killer Bomb and Pepe, they are basically identical. So what we're going to do is all this code down to here, from reset following path all the way up in there, is all the same. So we're going to copy all that, highlight there, and drop that in. So this is all the same. Save that. Now this is where he differs from the other guy. What we need to do is, after the vector, we need a different public enum. This public enum is going to have to do with his colors. So killer bomb colors, and we need, his colors are blue, orange, and red. And then what we need is a serialized field of said killer bomb colors called killer bomb color, singular, and it's going to be equal to, we're going to default to blue. Let's keep it alphabetical for right now, because you're going to be able to change this in the inspector. So when the scene starts, based off whatever color you have chosen in the drop-down field, that's what color he's going to become. So even if he's got that static blue image at the beginning, it won't matter, because when you play the scene or you play the game, it's going to switch to whatever you have chosen. So don't worry, he's not going to be stuck at blue. Next, we need 3 serialized fields. Now these are actually, this is how we're going to change the colors. And these are the override controllers. So what you're going to do is you're going to create 3 runtime animator controllers, serialized fields here. And the first one, we're going to say RAC for runtime animator controller. So RAC killer bomb blue. So that's the blue one. And then we need the orange one. And then we need the red one. So a runtime animator controller for the blue, one for the orange, and one for the red. And the direction stuff, same deal. So we're going to keep that the same. But what we're going to do down here is, after that, we're going to call a function that we haven't created yet. It's going to be called setColor, and the color is going to be based off of whatever's chosen in the inspector. So that's set. We're going to go down to after reset following path, all the way down here. And we're going to create a public void called setColor, which we just defined, and it's going to be of killer bomb colors, and it's going to be called color. And in here, we're going to set our killer bomb color to the value of color. So this can be called somewhere in real time through code, and it's going to change the color of killer bomb, so you can change his color on the fly. But what we also need next then is a function. It's going to be called setAnimator. We're going to create it in a sec. Because once we have the color, that doesn't really tell it. That tells it internally, this is the color that we're going to use, but it doesn't really change. It doesn't change the animator controller to say, hey, I want to be blue, or hey, I want to be red. So what you're going to do is you need this function that we're going to create now called setAnimatorController. And private void, and then we'll just copy that, drop that. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to use a switch statement. And it's going to be based off of whatever killer bomb's color is that we set above, and what we set in the beginning. In case you don't change it through the inspector, it's called at the very beginning when we do it in the start. And so case of killer bomb colors, we're going to start with blue. Let's just break it. We're going to type them all out. Let's put them in, and we'll drop in the other ones and paste those in. So we have blue, we have orange, and we have red. And inside of here, we're going to use in the animator, we're going to override whatever the current animator controller, the runtime animator controller, and we're going to change it to that blue. And we're going to copy that line. Not feeling like typing a lot right now. We're going to put that to orange, and we're going to set this one to red. So now we have setting the animator controller. And so when we start out, it's going to default to blue, and if you change it in the inspector, it'll be whatever the value is in the inspector. In our start, we're going to call set color, pass it the color of whatever this happens to be. And then in set color, we're going to set that color to override the variable. And then we're going to change the animator controller to whatever the color controller is, the override controller is. So now back over into Unity, save that, let's just save it just to make sure. Back over to Unity, if we go back to Killer Bomb and scroll all the way to the bottom, got all the Bezier stuff like we had before. Here's our enum. That's a drop down for whatever color, blue, orange, and red. Now we need to assign the serialize what those controllers are. So if we go back over to our assets and animation, or animations, enemies, and Killer Bomb, we're going to set those. So our blue override controller is going to go there. Our orange override controller is going to go there. And our red override controller is going to go there. So let's save that. And for right now, we're going to make them go right now. We're going to go right to left for a moment, just so that we can move them on the screen. So let's bring this back over. Right now, he's got the sprite of blue. Let's just shrink that up. I'm going to come over here. We're going to play it with blue, which it already is. And he's going to follow the Bezier path, and he's blue. So let's stop that. Now we're going to try out the orange one. So changing it to orange, it should override once it starts up to change it to orange once the scene starts, or the game plays. So let's try that. So now he's orange. So the override controller is using the orange graphic, because that's the animation that happens to be orange. Now let's try it with red. Play that. Now he's red. So now it's using the red one. Okay, so that's working the way we expect. So we're going to change that back to default to left, default to blue. We're going to change his position back to 0. And we're going to save all that. Drag that out of the way. And what we're going to do now is we're going to make a prefab out of him. So let's go over to enemies, prefab folder, and drag in Killer Bomb. So now we have Killer Bomb. So what we're going to do next is we're going to put some of these enemies in the scene now. So we can drag this back over. Let's shrink this down a little bit, bring it over here. What I want are 5 Pepes. We're going to drag Pepe in there. And we're going to duplicate him. So we're going to highlight him and we're going to duplicate him 4 times. Pepe, 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 and Pepe. So these guys, drag him down below them. So F2, we're going to rename them. Oops. Not going to be the same. We don't want this parenthesis number stuff. Let's name that. Name that. F2, rename that. Killer Bomb, same. Control D, Control D. But what we're going to do with this is Pepes are all the same. However, Killer Bombs, we have different colors that we can use. So the first one is going to be blue, which is there. The next one will make orange, and the third one will make red. And zoom in here. Now we got to change their positions. So we're going to put them all at the end of the scene, and since they're all going to be going left, so let's start with all these Pepes. Drag them all over here. So let's just start like over here-ish. Now, the second guy, let's just put him like up here. The third guy, I don't know, we'll do him like over here. Fourth one, maybe about there. And the fifth one, we'll do like down there. about the same level where the player is going to be. The killer bombs, we're going to move all them after the penguins. And then the second one, we'll put them up here. And the third one we'll do about there. Okay, so now with this scene created, and let's go to what I was talking about before I forget. So let's just disable all those for right now. We're just going to work with Pepe. So this Pepe, let's choose him. So when I was talking about, what were we talking about? We're talking about the decay of the Y and the pausing thing. So let's start with the pausing. So right now, if we play it, he's frozen and he picks up, no problem, just fine. So let's go over to the script for Pepe. And what we're going to do is let's, inside of our, while we're frozen, let's just disable this start. So it doesn't add on delta time to whenever we calculate it. Because what happens is when the scene starts, update is called right away. And what update's going to do is, even though they're frozen and nothing's moving, however, update is going to do this right at the beginning, at least once, and it's going to calculate the start and the ends. And we know what time we started at. And then we freeze them, and it's expecting that it's still traveling, but it's not. So this time is actually going to end up becoming wrong. So let's save that, go back over here, and let's play it. So now we just calculated our start and end points right now, but he's still frozen. So now it's like when he's done being frozen, he's gone. Where did he go? Let's try that again. Play it. Maybe we can see it if we zoom out. And he's all the way down there now. So his Y basically got jacked up. So that is why we have to add on when his start time is. So let's take that out and save that. The next one is going to be when he moves. Well, we can't really see that when he goes outside the camera because we're going to do that next. So when he goes outside the camera and we reposition him, well, his next, when you move him outside to a new position, it doesn't actually follow the point that's calculated. So it basically screws up his Y and slowly screws it up. So we're going to get to that in a sec. So now we're going to go over and edit the game manager. So in the game manager, when we have the update function, we had a part in here where it said, while the game is running, we can do things here while it's running. So what we want to do is we want to check the position of all of our enemies. Once they go outside of camera range, we want to bring them on the other side of the outside of the camera range so they come back. So if you watch that video in the beginning, every time the Pepe left the scene, he would start, or Killer Bomb would leave the scene. He came back and was coming at Megaman again. So we're going to replicate that behavior. So what we need to do in here is we're going to create a new function. And this function is going to be a private void. It's going to be called reposition enemies. No parameters. Okay. So there is a camera function called viewport to world point, where, let's just type this out real quick. So we want the left side of the camera. So we're going to use our main camera. So camera.main.viewport to world point. And we're going to pass it a vector 3, negative 0.1f, 0, and 0. And then we're going to do the same thing, but this is going to be the right side of the camera. And this is actually going to be 1.1. So you can go look this function up on Unity's documentation, but what it expects is it's going to expect this vector. This vector is the bottom left point is 0, 0, and the top right point is 1, 1. Well, we don't care about the y, so we're going to use 0 on the y. What we care about is the left and the right, the x. So what we're doing is we want to calculate what world coordinate is right outside the camera. So we use 0.1, which should be enough padding on the outside of the camera, but not too much. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use this function to find out what world coordinate that is. So once our enemy gets to that point, or be a little bit beyond that point, depending on how fast the frames are updating and everything, once it gets there, we're going to take our enemy and move it to the other side, which is calculated from this point, this x. So we're going to go a little bit outside the right side of the camera and move them there. So it's going to move them to the right side of the camera. So we need to know where those are, and because our camera is going to be moving, if Megaman's moving on the screen, our camera moves, so they're not going to be constant. So we need to calculate, we need to use this function to figure out what those points are going to be as the camera is moving throughout. So now that we have that, we need to get our enemies. So much like we've done in other cases, we're going to basically find all the game objects that are tagged as enemies. So game object dot find game objects plural with tag of enemy. And then for each of those enemies, so game object enemy in enemies plural. So now we're going to basically see if the enemy's transforms position.x happens to be to the left, so world left.x. If it's less than that world x left, which is right outside the camera, then we want to act on that. So if it's not, then obviously you'll stay within the camera view. But once it gets outside of that camera view, past that, a little bit beyond the camera, and then it's like, okay, so we want to act on that. So what we're going to do, though, is we're going to switch on, this is why we renamed all the enemies, and we don't have the word clone or parentheses and everything. We're going to switch on the name. So we're going to switch on case of killer bomb and case of Pepe. We're going to start with killer bomb. So the enemy's transform is going to be a new vector. And what we're going to do is we're going to move his x to wherever that right side of that camera is. His y, actually, let me do it this way so you see what happens. So this, if you see this and you know how to fix it, we're going to use a random. So we're going to change the y randomly. And this is basically a range. So it's not always going to be get the other side, get the other side. We're going to vary where they reposition themselves on the y-axis. So negative 1.5f to 1.5. So it's going to pick a float between that range for the y value. And no z. But then you're going to see, oh, it's got this thing here. And it says random is ambiguous reference to blah, blah, blah. System random versus Unity engine random. And that is because up here we ended up using system because we needed string format, if you saw that in the last video. So what we're going to do is we're going to prefix this. So if you ever see that, that's why that error message or that is happening. So we're going to say, okay, we want the random from the Unity engine. Okay, next, we're going to get the component of Killer Bombs controller, and we're going to reset the following path. But, well, we're going to do that first, and we're going to comment that out. You're going to see why it's going to jitter, and why it's going to decay. So what we're going to do now is this. I'm going to paste that in there. It's basically the same. However, we're going to vary up his y. We're just going to use -1 to 1 within that range. You can pick whatever ranges you want, but make sure you check and they don't go like way above the camera or below the camera. And maybe not too high, because then how's Mega Man supposed to shoot them? But you know, it passes through the scene every now and then, and it's like above where you can get to them. Eventually it'll fall, but just make sure your values don't go too much outside of the range where he can jump and shoot. And then the next one is actually the Pepe controller and reset following path. So now we're going to save that, and we're going to take this function, and inside of our game loop, which is right here, we're going to drop it while the game is not over. We're going to put that in there. So every time it runs, it's going to check the position of the enemies. Hey, am I outside the scene? If I am, boom, drop, or outside the camera range, boom, drop it on the right side of the camera and move them. So let's save that, go back over to Unity, and now we're going to highlight all of our penguins and all of our killer bombs and re-enable them. So let's save that, and we're going to play it. And for this case, we're going to wait for him to land, and I'm going to press I, so we're invalid layer index. That's the problem with copying and pasting sometimes. So let us stop that. Alright, killer bomb. So go back over to your killer bomb script and change that animation to actually be killer bomb flying, not Pepe. So save that one more time and play it. Hopefully that shouldn't happen again. And we're going to press I for invincibility, zoom in, so all these penguins and everything. So let's go over here. So what they should do is once they exit, they're going to start spawning on the right side of the camera. Not really spawning, but they're moving their positions. So they're coming back on the other side of the camera. So what we're going to do is now we're going to move Mega Man. You see, as they get to that left world coordinate, they're basically coming on the right side outside of camera range and moving their positions. So let's keep them in the view. So if we keep going left, none of them have gone outside. Oh, can't go any further. Now they're coming back on the right side. So that's how you can reposition your enemies while the game is playing. So now what we're going to do is that one thing inside of the game manager. Let's just disable this so you can see what happens. So we're going to disable the following path, so it doesn't calculate a new start and end points on the curve for each of the enemies. So if we play it now, invincibility. Let's wait for him to come over. I'm going to zoom in because once they come over here, you see this all ring, 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 it's bouncing. And the Y is decaying on each time it passes over. So now he's like way down here, way over there, way down here, way down here. So that's the compensation for that. So you have to reset that flag so that it calculates new start and end points. So I wanted you to see what would happen. That's why we have that. And that's why we need it. We don't need it with all of them, but we need it with them because their movement is calculated, and throughout the scene it's basically applied, and it has to adhere to that. So let's press I. So now when they go outside the camera view, and then they start, and no more jitter, no more decay in the Y. So we have two enemies now. We have Pepe and we have Killer Bomb. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to turn off invincibility in a sec, as soon as I can find a spot where I can do that. And we're going to shoot Killer Bomb. And then there's my damage animation when I get touched. And if I bring this over, let's look at it from this side, I should have lost, I think it was 3. And then there's my damage. So actually, let's let ourselves die real quick. So we can pause everybody, we can freeze everybody when the game stops. Boom! All frozen, game resets. Killed that Killer Bomb, he's worth 800. We're gonna kill some more. Where are you guys at? There you are. Now we're at 1800. Kill that bomb, little guy. Oh. Kill you. Ah, well, maybe not. Boom. And hit. And I guess we killed them all. E to explode. Restart the scene. So there. We've hit the end. We're going to stop that. So those are the first 2 enemies that we've created for this video. And the next one and the following, we're going to create 2 more. So that is how I basically replicated the creation of Killer Bomb and Pepe the Penguin from the original Mega Man. So I don't know, there are probably other ways that you can do it, but that's the way I came up with doing it. So I hope you found it useful, and now you can add some enemies. You don't actually have to have the scene, because as long as you have that utility function and those other couple classes and have all the layers and everything in place, you can basically drop them into yours. So you don't really need to start with videos 1 through 5 to set the scene up. So you can just start with the enemies if you want and get them into your projects. But we're going to move on. We're going to move on to doing Mambu the Flying Shell next, who has animation events, and he's got invincibility when his shell is closed. So that'll be a lot of fun. So if you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up. And if you like, subscribe so you can put on notifications and see when I'm put out the next video. I'll pretty much do it every week. I got about 4 more to go after this until I take a break and get back to actually developing this thing out, and then I'll be putting out videos here and there of other things like teleport animation. We can do other things like boss fights when we build a boss, and more enemies as I create them. Like I still have to get back to Kamadoma, the flea, the jumping one, and I think I was overthinking that because I think I know how I'm going to do it now. So if you have any questions, you can leave comments. All the source code for this is up on GitHub. You can see the link in the description. And if you, well, I guess that's it. So take care. Have a good day.